All right. So for this evening, we're going to kick off our careers in IT series. So our very first speaker is Mr. Edward Moses. I'm very delighted. I'm very delighted that Moses is going to talk to us about careers in IT security. So Edward is the director of risk and compliances manager at the Office of Cybersecurity in KSU. He has over 30 years of IT and cybersecurity experience in various different domains, such as law enforcement, military, banking, telecommunication, manufacturing. Uh, we are very lucky that Edward landed in KSU. And Edward have obviously is alumni of MSIT. He also has MBA from KSU, a master degree in technical communication from the SPSU. So Edward, in his spare time, he enjoy sci-fi books and movies, 3D printing and CAD, and of course, learning new technologies. So without further ado, Edward, do you want to take it over?
Absolutely, Dr. Lee. I'm going to turn on my camera so everyone can see my smiling face. Hello, everybody. And I'm going to share my screen. Give me one moment to make that happen. Hopefully everyone can see and hear me at this point, as well as my slideshow.
Yes, we can.
Sweet, sweet. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you, Dr. Lee, for having me. And I'm glad to speak in front of my fellow owls here this evening. Again, my name is Edward Moses. I'm the Director of Risk and Compliance Management here at the Office of Cybersecurity, part of the University IT Services at KSU. A little about me. I have over 30 years, as Dr. Lee said, in information technology and cybersecurity. Somewhere between information technology and cybersecurity, they call it information security. I have a few degrees and certs. Technical communication. I recently graduated from the MSIT program here at KSU. I thought it was great. I, of course, specialized in information security. I have my MBA from Coles College. Back when they offered specialties, I got that in information systems, business information systems management to be specific. You might have seen some of these other certifications, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about certifications a little bit later. The ones you may not be as familiar with, the GSNA, GCIH, GPEN, and PCIP. Be patient, I'll talk about these in a little bit of detail later. I've had a lot of positions within IT and cybersecurity. I started out as a desktop support person, went on to administer systems such as Novell NetWare and IBM. I'm trying to remember the name of it. I can't remember anymore. It's been too long, but some IBM servers at the time, and eventually Microsoft servers and networks before I started full-time in cybersecurity. And there's some of the logos of a few of the places I've worked. I was a police officer with the city of Atlanta for 5 years. After I got out of the military, I was what they call a crypto linguist in the military when I serving in the Navy for 5 years. And these other places I've worked. My first dive into full-time heavy-duty security was when I worked for Internet Security Systems. Now it's an IBM company, IBM Internet Security Systems, where I supported their intrusion detection systems. I'm a member of a few organizations. The Information System Security Association was one of the greater ones that I get a lot of benefit out of. OWASP and InfraGard. InfraGard, not so much. That's more private sector. It doesn't have much of a following here in in higher education. Some things I'm going to talk to you about tonight. What would be any security presentation without some statistics? I like to call it, well, a lot of them start out with fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or FUD, where we talk about how big of a gap there is in positions versus the people to fill them, how many companies are paying out billions of dollars every year for malware and ransomware. I'm going to take a little bit of a slant on that. GRC, Governance, Risk, and Compliance. I'll tell you about a day in my life here as a director of Risk and Compliance at KSU. Talk about some useful skills. Not all of them are going to be how to create drive shares and how to scan a device. There's a lot of non-technical and what I like to call soft skills as well. Some of the job specialties, we'll go over those. Those probably changed annually, but they've stayed somewhat steady over the past few years. Education and certification. You're all on the right track because you're taking your first step with education right now. And ways into the cybersecurity career field, how to maintain your competitive advantage in cybersecurity and what the future may hold. Again, I told you I would bore you with a few statistics. If you notice at the top, cloud computing security has bubbled up to the top. I think that's not a recent thing. That's happened a little while back. It's getting more prevalent because Google, AWS, Microsoft Azure, they're all ways of companies providing information service out, having to spin up a data center. It takes them a matter of seconds to spin up a new PC, a new VMware cluster and make it robust and redundant and allocate more drive space if they need to without having to go out and buy more hardware. You also see risk assessment, analysis, and management. That's more my area. I know a lot of people visualize cybersecurity as, for example, I'm sitting there looking at a computer waiting and saying, "Hey, Joe, come here, look at this. Look where Bob is going today. Look at the websites he's going to. I wonder if his wife knows about that." No, that's not what we do. A lot of people see that. That's what they want to do. They want to be penetration testers. If you notice, it's at the bottom. Nothing against penetration testing. It's a highly technical skill area, but it is not the most lucrative within cybersecurity, and it is not all we do. Application security is fairly heavy because marrying someone that is a good developer with someone who's good at security and getting them together, that's highly specialized. If you can find a way to get into that, if you enjoy development in any language, especially web languages, that is an area to get into. Web vulnerabilities are some of the worst ones out there, and it's not always highly deeply technical stuff. All right. Day in the life. One of the biggest things I do every day, I get requests from, we have a development group here on campus, and we have faculty and staff that want to purchase and install or develop some application to put on a KSU PC, a KSU owned PC, or in our infrastructure and run it. As you can imagine, a lot of things can happen when people don't go and ask someone like me to take a look at the security of their application or how they're going to implement it. So they decide to spin it up under their desk or go into the cloud and then somehow put KSU's name on it. It's bad for our reputation if it gets compromised, and we may not have even known about it. Granted, there are some things we did know about from a cursory perspective, and some of them I won't go into them here, but some of them, if you just Google the past few years dealing with the state and leakage of information potentially, some people, maybe a professor or an emeritus professor, might have spun up a system and didn't secure it properly, but it was on our network, so we're kind of responsible. Data loss prevention, DLP, that's one of my biggest things, keeping people from sending information out of Kenesaw's network and to Gmail or exfiltrating it. Most of the time, I would say 99.9% of the time, it's totally benign, it's innocent, someone made a mistake. A good example, we've had staff that have sent grades for students. We've had faculty do it too. They send grades for students. They meant to send it to someone else, another faculty or staff member, which is fine, but they accidentally sent it to all the students. So imagine their embarrassment when you get your entire class roster and all their grades and all their GPAs. For some folks, they get a slap on the wrist, but we have seen people get let go from their positions as a result of that because of the family education and protection. I can't remember the exact acronym, but FERPA,
Yeah.
Family Education Rights and Protect and Privacy Act. That is a big no-no. But we have things in place where we prohibit people from emailing, for example, more than one or two KSU IDs, because that's usually included in that, the student's name, their KSU ID, their GPA, or their grades. So we look for that in emails going out to Gmail or going to students especially. We try to block that automatically. We also try to block people saving social security numbers and credit cards, passport numbers, bank account numbers. This is a particularly busy time of year for me because people like to email and save their tax return. If you're a parent of a student, you're sending if you got to remember you're sending tax returns and you have your entire family's business on there, all their socials, all their dates of birth, your address, everywhere, what you and your wife do, for example. You don't really want to send that out in an email or store it someplace like on a public server or a Kennesaw State server. Policy and compliance. The things that empower me to enforce certain things and the Office of Cybersecurity are the fact that we have policies here at KSU on what you should and should not do. We detail what, for example, I mentioned earlier, the socials and passport numbers and credit cards. Those are considered confidential data. We define things like confidential data in the policy, and we say that these are the places you could store it. This is how you can send it to another individual. This is, yes, I realize it's kind of dry. It's not the sexy part of cybersecurity, but it's important. It's the governing thing that allows us to do our job every day. And we also have several things every year. Payment card industry or PCI Council mandates that we file a report on compliance or a self-assessment questionnaire every year to ensure that we're keeping student and faculty and staff credit card numbers when you go to the bookstore or you go to the student center to Panda Express and grab some lo mein, or to Chick-fil-A and grab something from there. We want to ensure that your credit card data is safe. Contracts and purchasing. Whenever there's a major purchase on campus for any kind of equipment, storage, or software, we have to take a look at it, and if there's a contract behind it, we have to look at that for ways that data is stored, retained, and destroyed. We have a lot of vendors, they want to take our data from, say, the banner system or from AliExpress, take it into their system, manipulate it, and then spit out a report. There's a lot that goes into that, and there's a lot of legalese that go to ensure that they properly store that data, because what happens if they get breached? Who's responsible for keeping the data secure? Who's responsible for paying the fees that will come with that? Because if you remember, I mentioned PCI a few minutes ago. If you have a credit card, if you're a credit card payment processor or a merchant and your credit cards get stolen, your credit card numbers, you have to pay $250 for each occurrence of credit cards in your database that were exposed. That would be devastating, as you could imagine, for an entity like KSU. Luckily, the USG, the University System of Georgia, covers us with cyber insurance for that, but still, the reputational damage is really hard to get past. And project management. Project management is a recurring theme. You should have a chance to take some aspect of project management in one of the MSIT courses. That's what everyone is in. And if you don't dig deeper into project management, it's going to come up in every single aspect of your work every day. And I also have other responsibilities. We occasionally have to do data recoveries. When people leave, we have to pull data off their hard drives or pull up their emails for separated employees and faculty and staff. Unfortunately, we've had faculty and staff to pass away, and the family or the department needs their emails. We would be responsible for going and retrieving that. It's just one of our collateral type duties, but we do it more often than you would imagine. All right, some soft skills you may want to be aware of. These are things that have nothing to do specifically with technology, but are very helpful in a cybersecurity career. Project management, I mentioned that earlier. Even if you are not a project manager, you have to be able to speak the lingo. You're going to have to track your time and resources for how you complete everything. You're doing it right now, whether you know it or not, with your classes. You know you have several hours that you're not in class or at work every day, and you have to make sure that you spend an adequate enough time for getting those things complete. For all of you that have taken, for example, the capstone or are taking the capstone, it's a tremendous amount of project management you have to do there. Writing and presenting. You'll always be writing something, you'll always be presenting something. As Gerald Ford once said, and I'm paraphrasing him from when he was president, he wishes he had spent more time in school learning how to write and public speak, because even if you don't know what you're talking about, for example, you might be able to present it in a way that you do. But that's neither here nor there. You want to know what you're talking about, and you want to come across that you're an authority on that subject, especially when you're speaking to higher level people in an organization. I have meetings all the time with the CIO. I have meetings with the chief legal counsel, the head of HR, the deans of the different schools, the president even. I've had many conversations with Dr. Witten. You have to learn how to, for lack of a better term, how to speak to them. They don't want all the minutia. They want to know. They only have a few seconds to listen to you. You have to come across quickly and accurately, tell them what your plan is, get their feedback, and then move on. They're not going to have a long time for you to discuss any deep details. Persuasive arguing. That goes back to what I just said earlier. I have a lot of uncomfortable conversations with people because, for example, they might tell me that wanting an encryption method for data is adequate, and these are highly technical people. These are not just average individuals, but this might be a C-level, and he's saying this level of encryption should be adequate. And I'm going to come back and say, well, according to this, and this, that's not adequate. So we need to meet somewhere in the middle. That is an art. That is not something you can really easily learn. So that's going to come over time. But any chance you get to learn things about persuasive arguing, I highly recommend it. Your desire for continuous learning. I made a joke to someone the other day, and I didn't mean to offend them. I told them if you don't want to have to continuously learn and relearn things, you should probably change to a liberal arts major or something. This is not the place for you. And I was half kidding because I look at my 30 plus year career. If I had stuck with only supporting desktops, and back then in the 90s it was MS-DOS running on standalone systems. If I said, well, I'm not going to ever learn anything else, I'm going to stick with this MS-DOS, I'm going to stick with Novell NetWare, I'm going to stick with what XYZ technology, I would be in a different field now, or I would be starving to death, because there's no need for that. You have to keep learning. The shelf life of your average high-end software or your average network technology or server technology is very short-lived. It seemed like yesterday I was supporting standalone servers, or I shouldn't say standalone servers, but servers that were in racks in a data center. Now, most professionals wouldn't go near a data center unless that's their job, to work for a service provider. So you have to be very flexible and be willing to continuously learn new technology. Ethical behavior. Remember, ethics is what you do when no one is looking. You can't, for example, go out there and hack into a system to try to get some street cred and hope that you'll be able to get a job in cybersecurity. Those days are pretty much gone. Kevin Mitnick, for example, made a great career out of that, and now he does public speaking for tens of thousands of dollars per 30-minute speech, and they have to pay his room and board and for his flight out to whatever the venue is. That's not the way to do it. He served time. That's always going to follow you. You can't undo that. So take the ethical path and do what you're doing now. That's why you're here. And again, public speaking. I highly recommend, if you are a little bit shy or you don't think that you sound great when you're public speaking, join Toastmasters. We have, I'm going to do a shameless plug, Dr. Lee, forgive me. We have a
No problem.
we have a Toastmasters chapter here on the campus called Legacy Owls Toastmasters. We normally meet over at KSU Center on Fridays between 12:30 and 1:30, but everyone is always welcome, and get to hone your public speaking skills. A lot of impromptu speaking is done there as well. That's all I'm going to say about that. All right, your non-IT skills. These are not soft skills, but they're non-IT. Physical security. Remember, if you recall earlier, I said I was in law enforcement. Physical security, that's fences, cameras, locks on buildings, guards, all that type of stuff. Data centers have to maintain their security. When I worked as a qualified security assessor with doing PCI assessments, a lot of the time I would have to go to the data centers and to see how they secure it. How long did they keep their logs? How many days, weeks, or months of video footage did they keep of the doors when people went in and out of the data center? That's all required by PCI. Physical security is an important thing. Critical thinking, especially important in things like penetration testing. You can't, I used to tell people, I have to always go through these scenarios in my head of how a criminal would do something, because if you're going to think like a police officer, you're never going to catch the criminals. You have to think like a criminal. But you also have to think critically. Locksmithing. Locksmithing is a very popular subset of physical security, in which you'll practice breaking into doors, for lack of a better term. Part of my physical security assessments was to see how well the doors were locked, for example. It's also a great hobby. If you need a hobby, you can buy some locks and a good cheap lockpick set. Padlocks, you can buy door locks, and sit there and practice them while you're sitting at your desk every day. Legal, I mentioned earlier, contracts. I have to know some legalese. I've taken a paralegal course just so I could get more fluent in legalese. It didn't really help because what I'm looking for specifically in our contracts is a little bit different from what they teach in a paralegal course, but it wouldn't help. It's also a great way to break into cybersecurity from a non-technical. All of these, for example, are great for non-technical entry into cybersecurity. Business speak. I mentioned earlier that I have an MBA from Coles here. That was one of the most fun programs I've been through, and learning a little bit about all the different all the different areas within business, finance, accounting, operations management, marketing. It gets me out of my shell, if you will, from just doing technical things and learning about information technology. You should know, you should be able to speak to the business. A lot of the C-levels you deal with only know those things, and you may be trying to make their part of the company more secure. It's going to be really hard to do if you know absolutely nothing about that aspect of the business. All right, entry-level information security jobs. A lot. These are all jobs that could be under the security umbrella, but some of them, like firewall administrator here, for example, falls under network or information technology networking. Here at KSU, it would fall under our infrastructure engineering team. People in cybersecurity, believe it or not, we don't touch firewalls. We'll have to audit them occasionally, and that's good to have separation of duties. So we look at what the firewall administrator does, and that way we know that the rules he's writing are effective, and we don't have any access to the firewall to circumvent. So if he does something that's wrong, or for example, he's trying to do some kind of insider attack, we will see it when we audit the firewalls. But it's good for that to be a separate entity. Security Operations Center, or SOC. This is a great place where people start their cybersecurity careers because it's a room full of people. It's 24/7. You get to see a lot of things. You're mostly looking at some sort of SIM or security. I can't remember the entire acronym, but a SIM is some kind of enterprise management console where you're watching logs, and correlated data from those logs come through 24/7 and trying to find some kind of pattern. But it's a great entry-level position if you could get it. Intrusion detection or appliance support and administration. There's a lot of security appliances out there. They're starting to blur. It's very rare that you're going to find a firewall anymore that's not doing intrusion detection or doesn't have that capability, and doesn't also do a few other things. Some of them are doing load balancing, where if a website starts to get hit too heavily, it'll spin off another copy of it, or spin you over to another system to help distribute the load. Intrusion detection systems, I mentioned that when I was at Internet Security Systems. That's a great way to see how systems are attacked. Tech support, not exactly security, but it is an excellent way. In fact, I would say, a lot of people may disagree, that you should spend at least a year doing some sort of help desk, system administration, and or technical support of something in order to get your foot in the door into cybersecurity. If you can't identify a lot of the parts of your network or systems, even if you have a master's degree in it, like everyone here is, I believe, trying to get, it's going to be very difficult to get a job, and you don't know a lot of the lingo and how to just do basic troubleshooting. Security tool support, again, you may not be administering the firewalls, you may be supporting it in another way. Some of the SIMs like Splunk, for example, or Carbon Black may require some sort of administration, and it would be a great way for you to break into cybersecurity by learning those tools and supporting them. All right, we mentioned certs earlier. Certs are not mandatory, but they do help. If anything, or if nothing else, they help with getting your foot in the door. There's a lot of recruiters that have Resumix or some other system scanning resumes that come in, and the hiring manager may be looking for that CISSP. They don't really care about much else other than seeing those 5 letters because they don't know any better. A lot of times they aren't as familiar with cybersecurity. So it won't hurt to have that, and it's still the #1 certification since roughly 2009. The CCNA security is especially helpful because not only will you know security, but you'll get a good taste of network administration as well. The CISSP with a concentration is great, but that's for people that have had many, many years in cybersecurity and they already have their CISSP. The CISA is a specialized certification. It's not very technical. It's more for audit. I remember when I took it, there were some accounting related questions on there. Whether I got them right, I'm not sure. There's some that aren't on here that I hold. The ones that begin with G in the beginning, the GSNA, GCIH, GPEN. Those are from the SANS GIAC company, and they specialize in very highly technical certifications. That first one, the GSNA, is Systems and Network Audit. The GCIH is Certified Incident Handler, and the GPEN is a GIAC Certified Penetration Tester. So I got a good taste. I wanted to get a lot of breadth and depth of certifications to show on my resume to be able to get certain kinds of positions. The CompTIA Security Plus is still a very entry-level one. I don't know too terribly much about it, but I heard it's not a walk in the park. But after you finish your MSIT program, if you're interested in cybersecurity, you may want to take a look at that one. I know people that have been practicing security for a while that have taken it 3 times and still haven't passed. So don't think it's a walk in the park just because it's CompTIA. All right, formal degree programs. I don't think I need to say anything about that. That's why you're here tonight, right? Formal degree programs. Not only do we have this, but we also have the program in the Master's of Science in Cybersecurity that they just spun up. I'm sure Dr. Lee has presented that to everyone and the possibility of changing over to that if they so desired. IC Squared, they offer the CISSP and CISSP with concentrations. Those concentrations are typically going to be software development, trying to remember, architecture, and some of the other things. But like I said, you don't want to start out with those. You want to take the CISSP and then maybe wait a few more years and take the CSSLP or the architecture related cert. ISACA is the one that offers the Information System Audit or Information Systems Management. SANS GIAC, I mentioned that to you a few minutes ago. Very heavy technical. Their exams are very tough. HISP, the Holistic Information Systems Practitioner Institute. They offer a very broad type of certification that relates to ISO 27001 and some of the deeper security frameworks out there. CompTIA is one that offers Security Plus. EC Council is famous for the Certified Penetration Tester. And they're getting better with that. They actually have a practical certification that goes after that because the penetration tester cert is multiple choice. These other ones are more practical, whether you have to actually break into systems. Offensive security is infamous for that. To get the offensive security certified penetration tester, that's one of the toughest exams I've ever heard about. You get to break into some machines, and they give you 24 hours to do it, and then you have to write a detailed penetration testing report. It's all practical, but it's highly specialized. But if you want to be a pen tester and you want to be able to say, I know what I'm doing without anyone seeing you do it, I highly recommend getting that certification. And then there's the privacy. I don't know a lot about it, but the IAPP cert is great for privacy professionals. Most people, not everyone, but most that succeed highly in privacy are also attorneys, it turns out. And you have the non-security. Microsoft, Juniper, and Cisco. Don't sell them short. And as your cert shows that you know things about cloud or the Google Cloud, Juniper, it would be for networking, as well as Cisco. They both have firewalls, they both have networking equipment. Heavily into security, not a bad place to start. And also I mentioned depth versus breadth. Getting all the certs. I know people that have had a goal of getting almost all the certs that any one of these bodies of certification presents. Not the best idea. You'll be very deep in one specific area potentially. You want to be as broad as you can. You don't know what kind of positions you're going up for in the future or who you'll be competing against. So I recommend breadth. All right, getting into cybersecurity. We talked about security as a collateral duty. Perhaps you can get a position as a systems or a network administrator. They have a lot of security components in there. Remember, you're probably the one creating user IDs and passwords. You're probably the one creating, if you're a Windows administrator, for example, group policy objects that prevent people from disabling the firewall, the Windows firewall on their system. Development, that's again highly technical, and being able to marry development, being a great developer and a great security person, those are unicorns. You don't find them very often. Policy writing, you may come in from a writing perspective. You may work as a paralegal or in a legal forum. That's a great way to get into cybersecurity. You could be technical or non-technical. You don't have to know what you're typing on the keyboard for a system. There are ways of getting in. It's not very easy, but there are things. I've known a lot of people to become PCI assessors or payment card industry assessors that weren't very technical at all. You still have to know the technical terms, but you may not have to go out and implement them. There's operations security. I mentioned the SOC earlier. Great entry-level position working in the security operations center or a network operations center. Or tech support. These are just some of the security specialties that are out there. Believe it or not, I made this slide a few years ago, but this has not changed much at all. How do I maintain my great skills and my interest in cybersecurity? Continuing professional education is a great way. If you have most of these certifications, they require you to every year or up to every 3 years to show that you've gone out to some industry talk or to some conference, or maybe get another certification to show that you are continually learning, because technologies change, remember. I would say learn about other specialties or domains. You may support a system or systems that are in a data center, but you shouldn't ignore cloud. There's By domains, I mean governance, I mean risk, I mean cryptography. There's a whole bunch of subsets within cybersecurity to learn about. How do I move up the food chain? How do I get into a managerial role? Because that's ideally, I think, where everyone would want to be. Not everyone has to be. You can be very successful as an individual contributor and to lead a team. You won't have to write reviews. You won't have a budget. But who cares? That may not be for you. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. Get in as many professional associations and go to as many conferences and network with people as you can. I mentioned a few earlier, the ISSA, OWASP. You can join OWASP for a very cheap fee. I think last time I looked, it was about $25 a year. The ISSA is going to be over $100, around $100 a year, but great networking. And they also have free workshops you could attend, and they have monthly meetings you could attend. But I found the free workshops to be quite interesting. It's some technical area that they'll talk about, and you'll spend a whole Saturday, and they'll feed you, and it's free, other than your cost of membership. So I highly recommend find what's out there. Figure out what drives you, what makes you interested in cybersecurity. Again, there's nothing wrong with penetration testing. It's not something for me. I'm certified in it. It's not something I would want to have to do every day. You may want to focus on a specific industry. I've done telecommunications, consulting, manufacturing, higher ed, law enforcement, military. You can also specialize in any of those fields and find a way to work your way into their security area. So you have to think about either you want a security focus, which will get you in any of the verticals they're called, or do you want to focus on that vertical and then work your way into security? So you want to become the best telecommunications person, and now you want to do the cybersecurity portion of it. I find that these specialties are still in demand, and when I wrote this presentation years ago, I didn't have to change this much. I would say the highest, most technical, most difficult thing to do well is malware analysis. That's taking other people's viruses and malware, reverse engineering it, and finding out what exactly it does. That is not trivial. I would say that's on par, if not at a higher level than penetration testing. And of course, there's certs for all of these to specialize in. And we mentioned how cloud security and virtualization is at the forefront, especially with COVID. Now that everyone or most people are either working remotely or partially remotely, not having to go into a data center is a great benefit. Here's some resources for some of the things I mentioned earlier. Some of the conferences I enjoy, if you look at the bottom left, Secure World Expo. I think it's free or very cheap. No, it's free. You can email me if you'd like, or email Dr. Lee. He'll email me. I'm emoses, EMOSES, at kennesaw.edu. And I'll tell you how you can get into some of these for free. Security B-Sides is a big event. They have one here at KSU. Dr. Green from the Coles College of Business usually sponsors that. There's another one in Augusta that's awesome. I've been there. I highly recommend it. The RSA conference in San Francisco is expensive, and Black Hat DEF CON in Las Vegas is also a fairly big expense. DEF CON you can get into for, I think, still about $400. All right, I'd like to open the floor to questions at this time.
All right. So if you have a question, please raise your hand or type in the chat box so we can keep everything in order.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, while we are waiting questions, let me just make a comment. Edward just mentioned, I agree probably 99% with Edward said. Uh, cloud, cloud security is very important. We're adding several courses actually this fall about cloud management, cloud security, etc. And for the MSIT, we have many students working as security analyst, security engineer, network administration, etc., etc. Okay, now I have two hands up. So how about Patrick? You go first.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Thank you, Edward, for your presentation, and Dr. Lee, thank you for organizing this. Is good content. I appreciate it. Edward, I work for Equifax. I'm a technology leader at Equifax, and we're currently migrating into cloud, Google Cloud for specific. But my question to you, I guess, is what do you see as the future as it relates to risk with companies moving into the cloud, and how do you get people comfortable with the security protocols and the security enablement that's available in the cloud? Because right now it's very subjective. A lot of people don't trust it. And I'm just curious, what do you feel like the future state for getting people in the cloud, and then how to protect, the data that will be there once, as we migrate there?
Sure, that's a great question. I was very reluctant to have anything to do with the cloud for years because I mainly dealt with payment card industry stuff, and putting things in the cloud, I believe at the time, was a no-no. But I think they've gotten better with encryption, I feel. Being able to audit, that was another thing. We couldn't, as an entity or as a company, you can't say, I need to scan your cloud environment for vulnerabilities. You have to take their word that, for example, that they do that themselves and that they are meeting compliance minimum. So I would say we'll probably see more frameworks for cloud security compliance, and companies held to a higher standard for that in the future. I would say that that's the only way that people will get more comfortable and will trust their data somewhere where they can't see it. Because I think it's one of the greatest things to come along, because being able to allocate more disk space or spin up another server with the click of a mouse and not having to walk into it and wait for purchasing and make sure it's compatible or on a vendor's approved list. To me, that's awesome. So I'm going to say more frameworks to keep these environments compliant in the future. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I'm going to. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. I think Hassan is the next.
I'm going to answer questions as I see in order. Devin asks, what is the best entry-level cert to start with? A lot of people start with the CompTIA Security Plus, but the CCNA will take you a little bit longer, but it might be a little bit more thorough and get you a better start and better differentiation from people that just do security. One of the biggest problems of people coming out of school, I would say, from the ones I've spoken with, they know what they needed to do in school to get through the program. They got through the program great. They don't have practical experience, but they also have never done anything with, or not a lot with, PCs or systems or development. You need something underlying, I would say, because I came from that background. A lot of people wouldn't agree, but only knowing security and jumping into security, I would say, would be not the ideal thing to do, and most people are not going to want to look at you. So I would say the Security Plus or the CCNA with security, or they have some entry-level cloud certifications lately. There's a lot of those that are free, as a matter of fact. Google's I think is, and Microsoft. All right, Helen's asking to reiterate the first certification to pursue. I think that covers that as well. Either Security Plus, the CCNA with security, or one of the free cloud certifications. Marcella asks, which entry-level job would be a good way to start a cloud security career? And for that, I would say work in a security operations center or find some kind of cloud administration position or support position to start out with. I don't see an easy way or a good way to get around a support position as your first position. I know it's a drag, but
yeah,
I
actually, yeah, one of the recommendations is just get AWS certification. Actually, just recently we have several graduates who get this kind of certification and get into cloud admin. I think that next step would be the security role, as Edward mentioned.
yes.
And also we have hands up from Hassan.
All right.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation, Dr. Lee and Mr. Edward. My question, I think most of the other students asked. My specific question, currently I'm working on development or engineering position. I'm just trying to move into security. I'm just trying to see really specific security related certification. If you have, I know you already recommended, but if you have anything, mostly I'm working on cloud-based system engineering and development environment. If you have any specific recommendation to move from that area using that engineering skill into cybersecurity. My second question from your presentation, data loss prevention. How do you manage to minimize like false positive most of the time? You know, when we talk about DLP, you really, because most of the time I work with the team very closely on those areas. I'm not working directly on that area, but I see a lot of flags. So how do you manage those false positive, especially if you are managing or protecting those cloud services on your part of DLP? For instance, if you are using a mass communication, including third-party communication tool, MailChimp, constant contact, or those mailing lists.
Sure.
And yeah, how do you manage those? And the last question I would like to ask, how do you protect overall the information stored in KSU system and third-party application? For example, I was checking Teams, the KSU Teams. I am seeing it allows, we can't add any app like third-party app under the application. So those apps, do you vet them or do you just allow them? I have, in my organization, there is a policy they have to go through the higher education community vetting assessment tools. They vet them at a minimum, the light version of that. They have to qualify that to add in that app any vendors before adding them. So I just want to see the experience at KSU. Thank you.
Sure. I'll try to remember. Forgive me if I don't remember every single aspect of your questions, but the first one was for software security. I believe there's several software security frameworks. I'm not familiar with all of them. Let me grab a book. I started to read this one when I was trying to get more into software security, but there's quite a few frameworks out there which I'm really not familiar with because I don't do much in the way of software security myself. We only assess software security by scanning it with certain tools. For example, Tenable has a great software scanning. If it's a web application, for example, we might use one of the free or inexpensive tools out there to look for web application vulnerabilities. But I would say focus on those areas. Find a framework, learn as much as you can about it, and then try to offer up your time at your current position to take a look at some of their software as much as they'll let you and see if you can find vulnerabilities with their permission, of course. Your second question was DLP, I believe, and false positives. That's a moving target. We get quite a few, but we have to use our vendor to tweak the false positives as much as we can. It's really up to their algorithm. We can, for example, with Microsoft Office 365 or Microsoft 365, they change their algorithm all the time, and you can tell when they push a new version because we start to see more false positives of people sending data via email or storing it on SharePoint. So that's going to be something you'll have to work with your vendor, and over time you'll start to see other patterns. We get hit with. We'll see thousands, for example, of what look like KSU IDs being sent when they're actually ISBN numbers from the library. So we know that that specific user, if we see that user and large numbers of DLP hits, we know to ignore it. And there's also whitelisting. You can whitelist certain users because as much as I hate to admit it, there are some that will get, for lack of a better term, more preferential treatment if they yell loud enough that their stuff is being blocked all the time or deleted or quarantined with DLP. And I'm sorry, but I can't remember their third question.
Well, I mean, approving the third-party vendors, like if you follow any guidelines.
That gets back into our policies again. We do have acceptable usage policies here at Kennesaw State, for example, and that's more of a, I hate to put it that way, it's more of a sword than a shield. If you spin up technology that you knew that you weren't supposed to do, or that you weren't supposed to use, and you didn't get permission for it, and it ends up going badly, we get breached, you're going to be held accountable, and we're going to say, well, it was in the policy, you knew or should have known. So we do have an approval process. It's well documented out there through our UITS approvals. You're supposed to send them an email first, and then that's going to go through a committee, and including cybersecurity. Certain things we will vet. We'll scan them with our software, or we'll do what they call fuzzing by putting in fake data and seeing if we can break it. And if it's acceptable, we'll let people know. We don't care about how much it costs. We don't care about too many other things other than what kind of data is it going to store, or what kind of data can be exposed. Is it going to have any APIs or third parties accessing student data? Student data is particularly sensitive from our perspective. I hope that answered your questions.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Good.
Edward,
yes.
There's one more question from the comments.
Okay, any preferred Security Plus study content? They have, I can't think of any specific ones because that's not a cert that I hold, but they have some live instructor courses, but not everyone studies the same way or learns the same way. Some people are better with just opening up a book. Some are better with an instructor feeding them information. Some are better with an interactive course. It's all going to be your personal preference, but I can't really recommend any.
All right.
Project,
Maybe last question.
all right. Samara asked, how does project management play into cybersecurity? It plays into it quite a bit, where everyone is given a task or tasks with deadlines. You have to use your deadlines and your resources to get through those tasks. One of my biggest projects every year is to assess KSU's security for payment cards. I think I mentioned that. So I have a formal project. I have multiple teams that have to gather information to help me put together a report every year. So it helps you to allocate resources and time and to meet an objective based on a predetermined, agreed to timeline. It's that straightforward. It plays into everything, not just cybersecurity. So knowing project management will help you in every aspect of your IT career and possibly other things.
Yes, cannot agree more. Well, we are well over the time, but the presentation is very insightful, very informative. Thank you so much, Edward, for spending time with our student and share your wisdom. It is greatly appreciated.
It is my pleasure. Have a good.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm going to share the PowerPoint you used in this presentation, also the recording with the student for those who cannot attend.
Okay, I'll send you the slide deck as well. All right.
And for the student, if you have further questions, feel free to send it to me so I can forward to Edward. All right, so that will conclude our presentation today. Once again, many thanks goes to Edward for taking time off from his busy schedule to share about his experience in the IT security field.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you both.